Hi, I'm Mariusz Boragielski,
And I'm Tamara Jones.
and we welcome you to our podcast. And today we have very special guest, Christina July Kim. She was born in Monterey Park, California, and moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico when she was 6 years old, and was the only Korean American girl in her class. Although Christina seems very happy, she was very ashamed of her Korean heritage. She escaped racial prejudice through acting and found freedom of expression through the theater. Christina is an actress, writer, director, executive producer, and producer. Christina, welcome.
Hello.
Hello, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm so happy to be here. And I know when Marius was sharing with me about what he wanted to do with the podcast and the people that he wanted to encourage during these times, I was just like, yes, sign me up. I would be happy to share any wisdom and experience, that I have, that I've gone through with the audience, things that I wish that I would have known maybe like 10, 20 years prior.
Yeah, and I have to add also, Christina is our real angel. Anyway, let's start from the beginning. You were actor and you act on the both coasts, in LA, in San Francisco, in New York. And then you start to write and produce your own movies. And
Yeah.
your last movie, Postpartum Problems, you ended up in a screening in the Cannes. And that's the film which is actually very close to you, but not only to you, but also to me. It talks a lot about the problems like many women has to face in 20th century and 21st century, obviously. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So it's so crazy. I think that people have been having babies for, since the beginning of time, right? People, it's not a new thing. And I think that these feelings of postpartum and these feelings of just helplessness and just change, such huge change. I feel like everybody feels certain feelings and emotions, but it's one of those things where people just kind of sucked it up and they just dealt with it. You know what I mean? Because that was what they were supposed to do. And I feel like now we live in a time where we're a lot more in touch with what we're feeling, what we're going through, and we have healthy ways to cope and manage those things through different therapies, we just are a lot more in touch with our feelings and emotions, right? And we feel the permission to be able to, express and share those things without judgment. And so I think that in that sense, it's such a wonderful thing because then, it's one of those things where somebody shares about their experiences and then someone else is then like, oh my gosh, you too? Like, I thought I was the only one that was going through it, and it's such a beautiful thing when you can create connections in that way through shared experiences. And so, again, it's like one of those things like postpartum in general, just it's major change. And I think that women, you kind of hear a little bit about it, about postpartum, the massive change that people go through. But not only women go through this change, but like men also go through this change as well. And I think that something that is never really addressed is how men also go through postpartum in their own way. And when it's not addressed, what happens is it ends up directly impacting the woman who's already going through postpartum herself. And so it's one of those things where there's a whole bunch of different statistics that I included in my documentary when I was putting it together. But one of the most insightful like research tidbits that I found was just a lot of the times men, they don't know how to cope with these feelings. And so they turn to a lot of substances to kind of numb themselves against these feelings. And in turn, they end up just, isolating and pushing away their partner. And as a result, just within, I think like within the first 6 years of a child's life, that's when there's a ton of marital dissatisfaction. And to be perfectly honest, I think that's also when a lot of negative habits, a lot of negative like things are said to one another that end up just eroding a relationship, and a lot of the times if a relationship falls apart, if not right away, it ends up just creating a huge wedge in a relationship, which ends up leading to divorce many years later, right? And so it's one of those things where I think it's an important enough of a topic to have made a movie about it. And I also think I really made this movie so people could talk about it. And I know, like, aside from the movie, as an actor myself, it's one of those things where I feel like I don't know what it is about actors, but we're so good at just creating excuses. I know when I was in college, when I was like in my teens and in my early 20s, I always made an excuse of like, oh gosh, like I wish I know I was in high school again, because then like, all the roles are like the high school roles, right? And then when I was like, in my 30s, I was like, oh gosh, like I wish I was in my 20s, because all of the roles are like for people in their 20s. And it's like one of those things where it's like I finally gotten to a place where it's like, no, like those are excuses that you're telling yourself. Like you need to stop and you need to like live life, because I feel like when you live life, you allow yourself to experience suffering, allowing yourself to experience just the positives and the negatives in life. It's like that's where you find that common element that applies to all human beings. And then that experience, when you bring that into your acting, like that's why you're so different, because it's authentic and it's real, right? And you can tap into that because you have real experience to tap into, right? And so it's like now I've gotten to a place where it's like, okay, what am I going through right now? And how can I make a film in a way where other people, when they watch it, they can relate? And in turn, we can have like a meaningful, fruitful discussion that can actually help people. So it's like my view of just acting and making films has pivoted, in a way. And it's largely because I got tired of being a starving actor, and that's what I did. I had these unrealistic expectations where I was just like, no, like I only want to make my living off of my acting. And I tried that for a while, and it's like I was so broke that it's just like I was so unhappy. And it's like I would be taking on these like acting roles that were embarrassing. And I was like, this isn't why I got into acting. Like, I didn't get into acting to like do these type of roles or like, it's just I got into acting because I wanted to tell stories, like meaningful stories that could really help people, right? And that's everybody gets into acting for different reasons, but that's the reason why I got into acting. And when I wasn't finding myself doing that, it just led me to spiral. And so I just took a break from acting, and I just decided to take care of my debt, because at this point I had so many student loans because I put myself through college, just trying to survive month to month. I was paying my rent. I was living in LA. So I was like driving myself to auditions. I was driving to work, and that takes gas, and gas is really expensive. And then, like, it's one of those things when I was living in LA, it's like, everybody was looking really nice, and it's like I felt like I had to look nice, so it's like I spent so much money on clothes, and that was also a way for me to like manage my own depression, like retail therapy, right, with money that I didn't have, which led to massive credit card debt. And so it was one of those things where I just got tired of this cycle, where I decided to just find a job, you know what I mean? And I think something that a lot of people don't know about is I'm also like my day job is that I'm an executive assistant, right? I didn't even know that these roles really existed, right? And it's one of those things where I started off as an administrative assistant, and I worked for a tech company, and that was like my end, like when I was putting myself through college, I had to have work study, right? Because I was on financial aid. And it was through my work study job that I had a work study job at the Keck School of Medicine, like in an administrative role, right? So I was like an administrative assistant. And so automatically I had this experience, right? So it's like later on when I wanted to pivot to look for like receptionist roles or like admin assistant roles, I already had a little bit of experience, right? And then it's one of those things where one thing led to another, and I ended up becoming an executive assistant. And executive assistants make really good money, and it's like something that nobody really knows about. It's like I support like executives of big companies, right? And these executives are making like 500,000, like over $1 million every year, right? And so the thing is, like, these executive assistants help manage them. They book their travel, they manage their calendar, they do events and special projects for them, so it's like that's my day job. And the thing is, like, I found myself, like, when I was taking my break from acting to kind of get myself together, and I landed this role. For the first time in my life, I wasn't working like 3, 4 part-time jobs to make ends meet. I was finally comfortable enough to like pay off my debt, which I eventually paid off a year after working in this like full-time role position. And then it was like a 9 to 5 job. And so it's like, after I left work, I was like, what do I do with all my free time? And I had never dated, and this was like in my 20s, like my late 20s. And I was like, I don't know what to do with myself and I don't know what to do with my time. So I started dating. I like went on Tinder, and I'd never dated before, and it was one of those things where it's like I didn't have time to date before. And now for the first time I actually had time to date and experience life. And then it's just like it was through that experience that I made a whole bunch of short films, and I was able to finance those films myself, which was incredibly empowering, because I feel like as an actor, it's the worst when you're just like, oh, like, I need you to give me money so I can make my film. It's like, no, like, I'm going to make my own films. And like, I acted in enough student projects where like I could call them for favors. Like, hey, like, remember I acted in your project, like, how would you like to DP my project? I can only give you this much per day, like, are you interested? Do you want to do it? And a lot of these people, like a lot of these people that I met, like, they wanted to work as well. And they want to tell interesting stories. And so they said yes. And so it's one of those things where it's like, I found, a DP, and I found like a crew that I could just work with regularly. And then that's why I started making films. And then it's one of those things where as my career kind of like took off in the tech world, right? I just always saved enough money to be able to always make films. So every single film that I make right now are films that I finance myself. And then along the way, I started the Silicon Valley International Film Festival. And that's a film festival specifically where I invite my tech professional network, like the executives that I support, like the executives who roll up to my boss, like the marketing team that like supports, our team, or even engineers, from our company who've always wanted to get into acting, but they never knew how to start. It's like that's when I invited these folks to my film festival, and I invited them to meet filmmakers of the films that I accepted into the festival. And they had this speed networking session where these filmmakers like talked about the next project that they were looking to raise money for. And obviously these people, like these tech people, have full-time jobs. They have money. And this was I started this in Silicon Valley, right? In the Bay Area. And it's like, there's so much money, like even in like the recession, like things are hurting, but it's like, that is one place where there's money, right? Not, it's a lot less money, during like recessions and during these economic times right now, but there's still money there, right? People are still having disposable income. It's just right now, like, what are they wanting to spend that money on? Do they want to spend that money on something that will give them a return? Or do they want to spend that money on just like, like artistic endeavors? So it's one of those things where I would coach my filmmakers, hey, when you're like talking with these tech professionals, you need to make it like I set expectations with them, like, hey, like if you want people to invest in your project, if they're not going to get anything out of it, they're less likely to give you money, so it's like maybe you can tap into, like their pride, you know what I mean? Like that part, like, hey, like if you ever wanted to be in a movie, if you executive produce this project, like I will put you in the film, and why would they say no to that? Nobody else is going to give them an opportunity. But at the same time, it's like now you're forming this relationship with somebody who's like who's a potential executive producer, for like future projects, and so it's one of those things where I would, do that. And again, like this was all when I was living in the Bay Area, and then COVID happened and the whole world shut down, daycare shut down. I had just given birth to my second child. And so my parents were in New Jersey. So we picked up and we moved to New Jersey. And that's actually where I met Marius,
Right.
like
So, yeah,
Marius was based out of New York.
yeah, that's right. And I have a question for you because when we met a few years ago, I was hit by your energy, right? And at that time, you were a full-time mom.
Uh-huh.
You were working for few companies,
Yep.
actor, and you still were a filmmaker. And I was like thinking, like, from where you take this energy? Because it's not easy to keep just one job, come home and be a parent to the kids, right? You have 3 kids,
Two kids,
2 kids.
3, including my cat.
But
Right.
yeah.
But at the same time, you were so involved with so many others' life, like you said, for the executive directors, for the execs of the company, right?
Mhm.
And then you still were managed to make amazing movies.
Yeah.
So where is this energy coming from?
Everybody finds their energy in like different ways. And I think for me personally, like I think, and this took me a long time to figure out, but I think my energy just comes from where I find my identity. And I think that before, my identity was in how I looked. My identity was in, oh, I'm the actress, and that was really exhausting because there was so much pressure to always look perfect. There was so much pressure to spend money to uphold this, like, unrealistic, version of beauty, right? Just being in this industry. So that's where my energy originally, like, fell on. And then that failed me because it just left me really unhappy and it left me with a lot of credit card debt, right? And it's one of those things where once I just took a break and I just really found a new identity, like I had a really good friend who went to church and I hadn't gone to church for a very, very long time. And I was reminded when I was at church that we are just so loved and that we have a purpose in our life, and like the church that we went to was a Christian church, right? And they believe that Jesus, was sent for all of us because he loves all of us, because he wants that relationship. God wants that relationship with us. So all of a sudden, like my identity went from trying to achieve this unrealistic version of beauty and success to my identity being like, I am like God's child and I am loved regardless of how much money I have, regardless of what I look like, all those things don't matter, right? And so it's like once I started really resting in my identity in that, I just doors opened for me. I started, instead of seeing these disappointments, if I didn't get an audition or all these things, like that didn't affect my identity. Before, when I had my identity in these things, my emotions were just all over the place. And it's like when I put my identity in something that is stable, right? That can't be taken away from me. It almost served as an anchor. And that anchor allows me to have energy. It allows me to find creative solutions. It gives me purpose, in the day to day. And so I think that for myself, just really reorienting where my identity was pivotal in terms of how I see life and how I see opportunities and what I want to do with my life, right? And so that's really, I think that was something that I discovered when I just kind of took a break from acting because I was just so burnt out. And I feel like now it's one of those things where, I did a lot of work like through that, through finding this new identity. I did a lot of work, on myself. Like, where did this desire come from wanting to be seen so much? And a lot of it, you read my bio at the beginning of this call, like I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I was the only Asian person. Like on my first day of school, I got made fun of for being Asian. There was a girl who did Chinese ice to me on the playground on my first day of school in a new place. And it wrecked me. Like I just started crying, And it's like I just became so embarrassed with my identity as a Korean American that I tried to not be as Asian as possible, And it's one of those things where just throughout my past, I just found I just tried to put my identity and I rejected my identity. It's just, I think a lot of it just happened with identity. But anyway, it's like through therapy and through like doing this work, I realized that that desire to want to be an actor and wanting to be accepted and seen just came from this very young age when I was rejected, right?
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where it's like once you find healing from all of that stuff, these other things like trying to find validation, like it's not that important anymore. And it's like with me where I put my identity in now, I already know I'm accepted. I already know that I'm loved, unconditionally loved. And that changes me, And so it's one of those things where now I feel like I finally have the freedom to do what I've always wanted to do, which is tell stories about things that we're going through that can help people. Because like the beautiful thing about telling stories and making films is that for like an hour and a half or 2 hours, you have someone's undivided attention. Like they are there a lot of the times, right? So sometimes they're not, but a lot of the times they're there because they want to see what you have. They want to know what you have to say. They want to see what the story is going to be, and their hearts are open, right? And if it's done, if a movie is done in a way, their hearts will stay open long enough to the point where you can get your message across, right? And then people learn and people have realizations about themselves. And for some movies, like they'll find healing, because they realize things about themselves that were so deeply buried, like within them, that like they didn't know that, they didn't know, why they had these feelings or concerns and stuff. And so anyway, like that's why I personally like love telling stories. So yeah, like with the postpartum thing, it was one of those things where I filmed it in 2020. I still had like milk coming out of my boobs and the entire world had shut down, and it was one of those things where I was just like I almost got divorced from my husband, several times. We got into a really big fight. And I was just like, I need to make a movie about this, and my husband was going through his own postpartum. And again, it's one of those things where now it's getting a lot better with men being more in touch with their feelings, and talking about this. But it's, I think for previous generations before, it's like men just were expected to just be strong all the time and not talk about things because it was a sign of weakness, right? And it's one of those things where I wanted this movie where it's okay for men to talk about, how they're feeling and how this new child is impacting, you know, their mental health and like their feelings, right?
I agree, but actually, you and your movie opened my eyes much, much wider because, yes, I heard about it, but I didn't even realize what impact it could be on not on your career, but your life.
Yeah.
So that's so interesting when you mention how it is both parents that are affected by this, even though women and men, especially in this industry, are going to exhibit that effect very differently. So to the new parents out there, to old parents out there who are kind of in this world, what is the number one advice that you would give them that would keep them going, or just like in general with their situation?
It's just there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Like it does get significantly easier. So it's just like it does get easier. And not only that, but it's one of those things where all of those things that you're feeling, like for people specifically who are actors, it's just, and if you are going through this and you are an actor, it's just like this is going to make you a much better actor because like all of those feelings that you're feeling, all of those things that you're going through, like just bottle that up because it's one of those things where at some point you're going to just wow people at certain auditions because you have that lived in experience, right? Yeah, it's just I think some encouragement I can give them is just that like my children are 4 and 6 right now, and there are challenges at every stage. I hear about my friends who have children that are like in the preteens, who are teenagers, who are in college. They all have like different challenges. I can speak to the parents specifically who are kind of like going through like that baby stage, where like the firstborn, it gets significantly easier when the child gets 4. Like when my youngest, I don't know what it is about 4, but when a child turns 4, it's like you turn a huge corner, right? And I know that if you just had a baby, 4 seems so far away, but time really does go by really fast. And, a thing that I will say is create a schedule. I think creating a schedule for your child, it helps so much because it organizes a lot of the chaos and you don't have to always stick by it, but just like create like a schedule for yourself that you can kind of follow. And it's one of those things where it'll help you kind of stay on track and it'll make the days go by a lot faster too.
Wonderful.
We will come back to postpartum, but let's for a few minutes talk about our industry, which obviously the change
Yes.
in the past few years with the pandemic, with the strike. Now, obviously, it's not better if it's not worse. So, and we see, and we talked with Tamara in a previous episode about actors who you think they should be more professional. They should like do, take seriously the auditions, but they declined without any reason. And obviously, we understand that everybody right now, they have to pay the bills, they have to have another job because there's no one that really can afford to live just from the acting. But what do you think? What is your take on this? On like how the new, especially the new generation, change and what they should actually do?
I mean, it's like the frustrating part about being an actor and being a filmmaker is there's so much that is out of your control. So, my advice to the younger filmmakers who are just struggling, like even financially, right? Focus on the things that you can control, is the advice that I would give. And by that, it's like always be doing little things that help you advance as an actor, as a filmmaker. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I feel like a lot of the times there are people where they are so hard on themselves. And again, I don't know where it comes from. Maybe it comes from something that happened within their childhood, right? Where they are striving for this perfection.
Mhm.
So, number one, let go of that and just do little things that, again, will help you. And what I mean by that is write out if you met something or something really interesting happened to you that day, like one day, or you had a really interesting thought, write it down. Get your phone and just record yourself acting out, like get a friend, like act it out with your phone. And it's one of those things like create, like, what are things that you have control over? Create a social media channel, where you can share some of these things. So it's like a social media channel, whether it be like TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, like create a thing where you upload some of these things. And like, not only are you practicing as a storyteller, but you're actually doing stuff. I think when you don't do anything, that is just a recipe for depression and you spiraling into this really dark place. It's when you're not doing anything, right? And then it's one of those things where when you're not doing anything and you're spiraling, then it makes you not want to do anything, right? Even more. So it's like if you're watching this podcast, if you're listening to this podcast, right? Do more of things like that. Try to take in the things that inspire you, that are going to push you to that next step. If there are those people in your life, that are like a weight and they're just getting you down, just for a season of your life, just cut them out. I'm not saying cut them out forever. It's just if you're not in a good place, maybe you need to take care of you first, get to a healthy place, and then you can let those people back in, right? But it's like when you're trying to survive and take care of yourself, these are things that you need to do so that you can become healthy.
Yeah.
But it's like, again, everybody has a phone. If you don't have a phone, you have a computer, right? Record yourself on your computer through QuickTime, right? Or something. And just it doesn't have to be polished. It doesn't have to be perfect because especially on social media, what people are going to be looking at is the content, like, is this interesting? And it doesn't have to be long because people's attention spans are so short.
All right, let's come back again to the postpartum. What would be your advice to any woman who has this problem and they didn't even know until the baby is born, and then suddenly the whole world is upside down and they don't know what to do? And you were very strong, and I know through the film, yes, you did went through a lot of like really bad things, right? But eventually you were so strong, you were able to win this fight, right? Fight for your family. But there is a lot of women who unfortunately they still cannot look at the kids, and we're talking about the years, not just few weeks or few months. And I know everybody's different, so there's no like golden recipe for everybody, but like what would be advice for those who not just struggle but they don't even want to talk about that?
Don't be alone. I think that the best thing that these women can do, especially early on, before they even realize that they need help, is just knowing like you cannot be alone and you cannot do this alone, right? Don't be alone. And the thing is, like, if that means just going to a place where there are lots of people, it's like a park or something, maybe to start, just be around people. If it means like going to like researching or looking up places where there are just people. And then not only that, but really kind of don't be afraid to reach out to your community from before, right? And the thing is, like, I think the other advice I have is if you are single, or you don't have children and you know somebody that did just have a baby, like I think the immediate reaction is, oh, they had a baby. Like, I don't want to bother them. I'm not going to reach out to them. They're busy. Like, no, like reach out to them because a lot of the times when people are in that place, they don't want to be a burden where they won't reach out. They don't know that they're supposed to reach out because a lot of the times when you're so busy taking care of this little human, you forget about all of your needs. All of your needs kind of go out the window, right? And then it just leaves you feeling really depleted and depressed. And so it's like when you get that phone call from a friend checking in on you, saying, I'm coming over. Like, I don't care what you look like. Like, I'm coming over. I'm bringing a coffee. I'm bringing like some food. Like, that goes such a long way. And when these women who are going through this, when they get out of it, which eventually they will, it's like they are not going to forget those people who were with them. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's one of those things where, again, I mean, more so for the women going through depression, it's just like, or who just had a baby, who are kind of in this like funk state. It's just like, if you know somebody who just had a baby, please just reach out to them because chances are they are in this weird place, even though, I mean, there are these women that they're like, oh, I'm fine. I love having babies and stuff. Like, they're not always like that. And so it's gonna be appreciated. If they make excuses, oh, I'm so busy, like, don't give up, just keep trying to reach out to them. And it's one of those things where if you know that you're gonna have a child, maybe you're pregnant, it's like, and you know you're gonna have a child, reach out to your community and tell them, hey, like, please reach out to me after the baby comes. Even though I'm tired, like, just come over and just sit with me. We don't have to be doing anything. We can watch TV together, but just like sit with me.
I know the postpartum is still not released, right? It's a very, very powerful movie and a beautiful movie. So we all hope that it will be released soon. So many people can take advantage of this film because I think they will.
Yes.
It is, as a man, I can tell you, it is very, very powerful. Yeah, Tamara,
I was going to say, can you tell the audience who may want to follow the progress of the film where they might be able to do that?
Yes. Yes, we have our Instagram page. It's at Selah Pictures, SELAH Pictures, PICTURES. We submitted it to a whole bunch of festivals, and we're just kind of like waiting to hear back. Hopefully, we're planning on having the world premiere somewhere, like sometime this year. And it's one of those things where something that I've realized is that's a thing with filmmaking. It's like filmmaking, I'm realizing it's like it's such a subjective thing. Acceptances into film festivals are all very subjective. There could be a film where technically it's perfect, but it still won't get accepted into certain festivals, right? And it's like, don't take it personally, So it's one of those things where just screen it, find an audience, have a conversation, put it out there for people to enjoy, and then just do it again. And it's one of those things where the more you practice, the more films you make, the better you're going to get at it.
it's a very difficult time for everybody, especially for distribution of the new film.
Yes.
So I would, I never gave up, and we know this movie will be seen by a lot of people, and they appreciate your work
Yes.
and how you share your life because it is your life actually, right?
Yes,
You're
it is.
showing the everyday from your life, struggling with kids, with mom, with husband, right? And that's what it's all about, actually.
Yeah. And it's like another aspect of the film that is my favorite aspect is I think a lot, and I'm just speaking from my own personal experience, but a lot of my depression and a lot of my, I think, disappointment and just feelings of just like where I just felt like I was in this dark place and I couldn't get out of it, where that stemmed from was I had this identity before I had children, right? I had this is like what I did, this is what I do, this is who I am. And then all of a sudden, it's like I feel like I can't be that person anymore because I'm stuck at home, like baby attached to the boob. And just like I have to feed them like every like 2, 3 hours, right? It's just very like I feel like I have these chains on me and I can't, and it's one of those things where I learned, hey, you know what? I'm just gonna take the baby with me, to places. So it's like so I adapted in that way. But I think that that's kind of what got me down a lot in the beginning. I feel like I can't do and I can't be the person that I was before, right? That's for myself where a lot of those feelings came from. And then just, it's like there are aspects of it. It's just everything changes when you have a child, it's just, and as somebody whose previous identity was in the way I looked, in beauty and all of that stuff, that contributed to, I think, the feelings of depression and stuff, because it's like now all of a sudden, like I gained like 70 pounds, it's like if I tried to work out or if I tried to go on a diet, it's like my milk supply would tank. I had this pressure. I put this pressure on myself where I was like, no, I want to make it a year breastfeeding my child because I can. And it was almost like this thing where I was trying to prove something to myself. And I don't know where that came from, but it's like I put this pressure on myself, So it's like those are all factors that contributed to, me being in this like really dark place, right? Looking back, I'm like really proud of myself, It's like I did these amazing, crazy things. And at the same time, I do know that it made me a more resilient person. It made me somebody where if I'm asked to tap into those feelings and go to that place, I can because I've been there, you
Not
know?
just you, but also people around you.
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure. Tamara, any
No,
questions?
I mean, what an incredible story you've laid out for us. And I think a lot of people are going to be very interested in seeing that continued journey that you're on and really diving into like what this side of reality is in this industry.
But yeah, I'm telling you, I think I can't stress enough. Don't focus so much on things that you don't have control over. Like focus on the things that you do have control over. As you focus on that and as you go in that direction, it's like you're staying in the game. Because I think that a lot of actors, what they do is they think of it as like, oh, I'm doing all these things. I have these expectations that aren't getting met. And they get so disillusioned and depressed and disappointed that they just take themselves out of it completely. Oh, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not supposed to do this anymore. Right. So it's like, it's one of those things where, yeah, that is going to happen eventually. But if you end up just doing little things that are within your control, acting, your big break, it's all about timing. And if you're out of the game, the timing can be right. But because you're not in the game anymore, like that opportunity is going to pass you by. So I think it's so important to position yourself in a place where you are always ready. You're always working on your craft. You're staying sharp with things that you have control over. So when that timing, when that opportunity comes, when the stars align, like you are ready.
It was very, very lovely to have you, like, as
Yes.
always, with us. And we so appreciate that you share really, really personal stuff from your life.
Yep.
And we know it definitely will help a lot of women that went through the same stuff you did before.
I really hope so. And that's why, I just was like, yes, I want to do this podcast because I think that that is just something that, at least for myself, it's like, it's something that's so important to me. It's just when I, really embraced this new identity, being loved unconditionally. It's just things that people say and do. It's like, it doesn't affect me as much anymore, because that's not, I know where my identity is. And there's just that anchor there. And it's like, it's one of those things where there are so many things that happen in life that are out of our control. And it's just knowing that your identity is in a God that is in control of everything. Even though you don't know the purpose at the time, you know that God can work those things for good, horrible things, like they can be worked together for good. Like that brings me so much peace and that keeps me in the game and that keeps me going. And so it's like, I think that where you find your strength and your peace, I think is something that, people should introspect on and really figure out where that is, because otherwise it's just, I mean, you look at what's happening just all around the world, it's just so easy to get down.
That's right. So thank you so, so much. And also, for all the listeners, you will find the link to Christina's trailer so they can watch. And hopefully soon, we can also announce the big premiere, right, of the movie.
Yes.
And we already invite everybody to watch because you should. You actually should. And doesn't matter what age you are, what gender you are, right? This is something that touch all of us,
Yeah.
and that's very important.
Yeah. And
Christina,
you know, it's like I hope my children are in this film, and I hope that they also realize, like, hey, like, yes, I'm your mother, but I also had this life before you guys, you know? And so it's like I hope they just, are able to see like not just me as their mom, but also like these other things, right? And
and they
that
were amazing,
encourages them.
and they were amazing in the movie. I mean, I know we talked about that, but when I saw that, oh my God, this is like natural actors, right? Sitting and taking directions, and they were very, very young at that time.
Yeah, they were. My gosh. Like 9 months, 18 months. I don't even remember. Yeah, 9 months. It was not before one. Yeah, before one for my younger one. And then the other one was two. So yeah, they were really little.
Yeah. Christina, thank you so much. And
Thank you for the space. Yeah.
and that's conclude our meeting with Christina Kim.
And for our next episode, we are going to be interviewing Alexandra Miles, who is working on Project Blackbird, talking about eating disorders and mental health disorders in our industries and how she's trying to combat them. So please like and subscribe and turn on your notification bell so that you don't miss any of our episodes and you can continue to follow along as we unveil the entertainment industry.